Hello, I am AARP Vice President Bill Walsh, and I want to welcome you to this important discussion about the coronavirus. AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan member organization, has been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years. In the face of a global coronavirus pandemic, AARP is providing information and resources to help older adults and those caring for them. As a result of the pandemic, some 30 million Americans have lost their jobs, and many are struggling to make ends meet. For many, it's unclear when they will go back to work or if they will. The toll has been especially heavy on older adults, whose unemployment rate is 11.8%. Today, we'll talk with experts about how you can manage and navigate your career in this uncertain time. If you participate in one of our teletown halls, you know this is similar to a radio talk show, and you have the opportunity to ask questions live. For those of you joining us on the phone, if you'd like to ask a question about how to manage your career during this uncertain time, press *3 on your telephone keypad to be connected to an AARP staff member who will note your name and question and place you in the queue. To ask your question, please press *3. Hello, if you're just joining, I am Bill Walsh with AARP, and I want to welcome you to this important discussion on your career and the global coronavirus pandemic. We are talking with leading experts and taking your questions live. To ask your question, please press *3. Joining us today is Augustine, career expert with TopResume. Also, Rebecca Dixon, the executive director of the National Employment Law Project, and Lee Baker, owner and president of Apex Financial Solutions. We will also be joined by my AARP colleague, Gene Setzvan, who will facilitate your calls today. AARP is convening this town hall to help you access information about the coronavirus. While we see an important role for AARP in providing information and advocacy related to the virus, you should be aware that the best source of health and medical information is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It can be reached at cdc.gov/coronavirus. This event is being recorded, and you can access the recording at aarp.org/coronavirus 24 hours after we wrap up. Again, to ask your question, please press *3 at any time on your telephone keypad to be connected with AARP staff. Now I'd like to welcome our special guest. Amanda Augustine is a career expert with TopResume. She brings her expertise in working with job seekers and recruiters by providing personalized job search and career guidance to professionals to help them reach their full potential. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
All right. Rebecca Dixon is the executive director of the National Employment Law Project. She leads the organization's work to build and contribute to a strong workers' rights movement that dismantles structural racism, eliminates economic inequality, and builds worker power. Welcome to the show, Rebecca.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
All right. And finally, Lee Baker, a certified financial planner and also the owner and president of Apex Financial Solutions. He has more than 30 years of experience helping people achieve financial security. Lee has served on the National Board of Directors for the Financial Planning Association, and he's a member of the CNBC Financial Advisor Council. Welcome, Lee.
Hey, good afternoon, Bill and everyone. I'm happy to be here.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today. Let's go ahead and get started with our discussion. And just a reminder to our listeners, to ask your question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. Amanda, let's start with you. So more than 44 million people have filed new claims for unemployment benefits since the pandemic started. And older workers already at risk of age discrimination have been hit hard. With the economy the way it is, there's bound to be a lot of people applying for jobs. So what can someone do, particularly if they're older, to make their resume stand out and get an employer's attention?
It's a great question. And I have to say, the most effective resumes have and will always be the ones that clearly demonstrate that you're qualified for the job you're applying for and the one you're applying for right now. So what I think is important is that you get into the mindset of really thinking about your resume more as a marketing document where you're choosing exactly which information you're going to highlight and even which details you may downplay or omit based on the role that you're applying for today, instead of thinking of your resume as this transcript of every role you've ever held and all of the education you've ever pursued. You definitely want to focus your attention on what you've done over the most recent 15 years that's relevant to the role that you're applying for today. You can note the details past 15 years, but recruiters and hiring managers are really interested in what you've done more recently that's relevant to what you're going after. And I think what's incredibly important is that if you're not sure if your resume is accomplishing these goals, if you're not sure if it's framing you correctly for the role that you're applying for today, seek out experts. What's really wonderful is that AARP has a resume advisor that's powered by TopResume that will actually give you a free evaluation. So you can determine, is my resume clearly highlighting and demonstrating that I'm qualified for the role that I want now, or do I need to tweak that information a bit more or reframe it so that I'm clearly a good candidate for the role I'm pursuing today?
Right. Thank you for mentioning that. I was going to mention that resume resource tool as well. Our listeners can find it online at aarp.org/work. Just let me ask you a quick follow-up, Amanda. Do you have any advice for older workers who, maybe concerned about nation? We know that algorithms sometimes frequently scan resumes these days. Do you have any advice for older workers to, be more competitive in the context of their resumes?
Fantastic question. I was hoping we'd get into that at some point. So 98% of Fortune 500 companies use some sort of recruitment software known as an applicant tracking system. And unfortunately, this software is much better at weeding out what it deems to be the least qualified candidates as opposed to identifying the most qualified candidates. In fact, about 75% of all online applications never make it past that gatekeeper onto a human for review. So a few things to keep in mind is that you need to make your resume, quote unquote, ATS friendly. Some of those things include, when in doubt, using a Word document version as opposed to a different format such as a PDF, unless the system clearly states that it will accept a PDF document. Not including images or any type of custom fonts. Those are often not read by the system. Also, you want to really carefully review your current resume and the job description that you're applying for, and look for those terms that are routinely popping up in the role. If they keep mentioning a certain skill, if they keep using a certain word choice, you want to make sure that your resume is mirroring that language, because that will help you overcome that electronic gatekeeper.
How important is it for older workers to include, the years they might have graduated from college? Is that critical? It can often be a tip-off to employers that they're older and then open the door to age discrimination.
100%. I actually wrote an article for AARP on how to age-proof your resume. And when I say that, it's really how can you eliminate or kind of mute some of that ageism or age discrimination that older workers often come up against. And one of those things is really only focus on including the work experience from the most recent 15 years. And when it comes to education certifications, if you have them and they're relevant, by all means include them, but don't include the dates that you received these credentials if they're past that 15-year window. It's not, people can read between the lines, but at least you're not sending up that flag and having them try and do the math and figure out how old you are.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much, Amanda. Let's turn to you, Lee. If somebody is close to retirement and finds themselves currently furloughed or unemployed, what should they consider before tapping things like their 401k or applying for Social Security?
Yeah, so there are a number of things that our listeners would want to consider before tapping their 401k or applying for Social Security, because particularly with the 401k, classic investment says, hey, you want to buy low and sell high. Well, the last thing you want to do is tap into your investments after they've dropped and you've experienced a loss. So we want to try to avoid that. But what can you do? If you still have your job, and you're still connected to that 401k, rather than actually taking a withdrawal, perhaps you can consider a loan on that 401k first. By doing that, you avoid the taxes because when that money comes out of a traditional 401k in particular, that money is going to be taxable to you. And so consider perhaps taking a loan first. The other thing another thing that I'd say is incredibly important is making a determination as to whether or not the reason you're taking it out is really critical. So there's a difference between being in a critical need versus taking it out for something that might be described as comfort, if you will. So if you have to take it out, make sure that it's critical. You have to maintain a home, those sorts of things. Now, ideally, before you do any of that, look into savings. Now, unfortunately, we know what the statistics look like as it relates to having an emergency fund, and far too few people have an emergency fund. But if you do have some other savings, take a look at tapping into those savings first. Another option that, quite frankly, for most financial advisors, under normal circumstances, we would absolutely advise against. But if it is a smallish kind of need that could be managed with credit cards, candidly, I would advise you to use a credit card, again, before taking that money out of your 401k or making a decision like tapping into Social Security early, because that's a permanent reduction in the amount of benefits that you get from the Social Security system.
Right. We advise people to hold off on applying for Social Security as long as possible.
As long as possible. Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. There's so many financial gains to be made by holding off. I think that's really solid advice.
Yeah,
Thanks for that.
Hold it off. Absolutely. It's an extra 8% a year, roughly. So the longer you can hold off, and at a minimum to normal retirement age, absolutely extend it as far as you can if possible. But the last thing you want to do is take it early and experience that permanent haircut and the amount of benefits that you get over the course of your lifetime.
Okay. Thanks, Ali, for that. Rebecca, let's turn to you. We're in a period where businesses are beginning to reopen and people are going back to work. And as this happens, things may be very different for employees. Businesses may be doing things that their employees aren't used to, like taking your temperature, asking you existing conditions. What are the most common things employees might encounter as they return to the office? And also, what should people know about their rights?
Sure, Bill. So employers will be implementing CDC guidelines to maintain a safe and healthy workplace for everyone. And to that end, they may ask about symptoms, but they should not be asking about pre-existing conditions. Some of the recent guidance looks at updating, updated strategies around this include maybe they could either do normal or phased in reopening, conducting daily health checks. So that could include a temperature check, conducting a hazard assessment of the workplace. So really looking at the workplace to make sure that the way it's set up is not creating an extra hazard around the transmission of COVID, encouraging employees to wear face coverings if that's appropriate, stepping up cleaning in high-traffic areas such as restrooms, and implementing policies for social distancing in the workplace, along with other things like plexiglass shields, closing of common areas, and for some employers, improving their ventilation system. So those are some of the common things that folks can expect as they return to work.
If employees have concerns that either their employer isn't doing enough to protect them or is asking for information like about pre-existing conditions that they really have no business asking about, what should employees do?
If they're being asked, if the safety equipment is not in place, I think that the first step would be to ask the employer to put those things in place. And that's always better if it can be more than one employee, if that's an option. If the employer then does not put the protective gear in place, then the employee would have to look at the options that they have, such as, depending on their state law, whether there is the ability to file a complaint based on state law, or they could file a complaint with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration on the federal level.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me come back to Amanda. What if you've had a job for a long time and recently got laid off? Where should you start? What are the most important skills to be building right now?
It's a great question, and it's going to be an answer that no one's going to like because I'm going to say it depends. There are obviously skills that are important for any field, and I think especially with what's going on now today, you're seeing a lot of employers looking for people who are flexible, can adapt to changing needs, that sort of thing. I don't think anybody's surprised by that. But when it comes to job-specific skills, it's really going to come back to what are your goals. And for a lot of people, this can be a challenge, but really pinpointing your job goals, which may be a short-term strategy for filling the gap right now because your industry isn't hiring or is on hold at the moment, or perhaps you are going for that long-term strategy, that more permanent job replacement. Whatever your goal is, you want to explore your options online using both AARP's job board and the other ones that are available to identify what do you want to do next, what is most realistic. And then once you're looking at those opportunities, then you want to carefully review those job descriptions and talk to the people you know who are working in those industries or at those organizations to get a better sense of, is there a skill gap I need to fill? Or do I simply need to update my resume, start networking, and get myself back out into the job market? One skill that's going to pop up a lot is the technology skills, of course. Is there any new technology in your field that you're seeing routinely mentioned on job listings that you didn't have to deal with? Now's the time to probably tackle that and at least become familiar with it so that you could field questions about it should it pop up in an interview. It might be the time to upskill, to take a course in that if it's something that's required in all the roles that you're looking at. So it really is going to depend on that role, but I think areas to look for in particular would be if there have been any changes in your industry that require you to have a competency or some sort of knowledge level of a new technical tool. That's something to tackle now, so you're better poised when you're applying for jobs.
All right, thank you for that. And Amanda mentioned the AARP job board. That is free to anybody at aarp.org/work. Those are carefully vetted employers who are on that job board, and the listings are updated regularly. So check that out if that's something you need. As a reminder to our listeners, to ask a question, please press *3. But before we get to questions, I'd like to take a moment to describe some of what AARP has been doing to help people who have lost jobs because of the coronavirus pandemic. As unemployment numbers have increased, workers age 50 and older and their families are being hit quite hard. The unemployment rate is increasing dramatically. It was 2.6% in February, and in June, 11.8%. We know that older workers can be at high risk for layoffs in times of economic uncertainty, and age discrimination in the workplace is an ever-present obstacle for them. AARP is continuing to advocate for our members and for all older workers. For years, we have fought on Capitol Hill and in state legislatures to protect them from age discrimination, and we've also worked with employers to recognize the value of experienced workers. As a result of the coronavirus pandemic, we have stepped up our efforts across the country to help protect workers and their families. In recent federal legislation, we helped secure an increase and expansion of unemployment insurance benefits, as well as paid family and sick leave. And in states like New Jersey, AARP has helped secure passage of a law extending temporary disability and family leave benefits to workers who need them to take time off to care for family members with COVID-19. Advocacy continues on these topics and more, from fighting for nursing home residents and their families to ensuring that leaders are addressing racial and ethnic disparities in their coronavirus response. These victories are made possible with the commitment and passion of AARP volunteers and activists nationwide. So thank you to these dedicated advocates. It's now time to address some of your questions about your employment during these uncertain times with Amanda Augustine, Rebecca Dixon, and Lee Baker. Please press *3 at any time in your telephone keypad to be connected with an AARP staff member to share your question. I'd now like to bring in my AARP colleague, Jean Setzvan, to help facilitate your calls. Welcome, Jean.
Hi, Bill. Delighted to be here.
All right, let's take our first question.
All right, our first question is coming from Dell from Massachusetts.
Hey, Dell, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, hi. I have been working as a CNA for about 10 years, and I'm not going to be able to go back to that. I've taken a leave of absence, for lack of a better word, because I live with somebody who's very vulnerable. And that's going to continue for quite a while. So I think I have to switch careers. I'm very close to, I'm like 3 years away from retirement. And a lot of my skills are soft skills. And I just don't really know where to start doing what I need to do. So it's kind of a vague question, but I can't do anything where I'm out of the house.
Understood. Well, I think it's a common question in these times that we live in. I wonder if Amanda Augustine, our career expert, has any advice for you.
Sure. It's a great question, Bill, and I know you're not alone in this circumstance. My heart goes out to you. I think a lot of people are now being forced to make changes whether they wanted to or not. The first thing I do, and you mentioned you have a lot of soft skills. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear exactly what role you've been, what career you've had leading up to this point. But the first thing I'd say for anybody is do that list. Make that list of what are my skills, what are my strengths, both as it applied to my specific role and what I think could be used elsewhere, and really get a good grasp of what that looks like. It seems like because you want to stay home, we're going to be looking for something that's a virtual or work from home remote job. And there are lots of ways to go about seeing what's available right now. Of course, there's AARP.org /work. I know that at their job board, they have remote roles or work from home roles. So if you search for that or part-time, there are also a lot of great resources out there. If you do a simple Google search for remote job boards, you'll find a bunch of them out there. There's actually, and I have no affiliation with this site whatsoever, but there is a guy named Ryan Robinson who has one article that lists over 60 different websites that specialize in remote work. And that would be, and it's by industry, it's by field. So that might be a really good place for you to start. For anybody who's kind of forced to shift, and if you cannot find a similar role that's suddenly remote and you're looking for what else might work for you, yes, explore your options. Look at the job boards and see, well, what's available and what skills are required and see what might be a fit. But another way to look at how could I go about doing a career change, I like to look on LinkedIn or just, your professional network. And I like to search for people who previously held a role similar to mine at a same company or a competitor who are now doing something else, just to get a sense of where else has experience like mine been accepted and been valued if it's not in my current industry. And those are the people I reach out to and say, I would love 10 minutes of your time just to get a sense of how did you go about this? Because they'll be really resourceful in helping you determine what parts of your background you should play up when you're looking at potential career shifts.
Amanda, that's terrific advice. Dell was a certified nursing assistant.
I wonder
if, a CNA. I wonder if there are resources out there that you know of that people can kind of put in their skills, their background, and it will suggest some potential career paths for them. Are there tools like that out there?
There definitely are. Of course, I don't know any off the top of my head, but I will try and get back before we're done with this call and give you some clear resources you can go to. But I do love the idea of, and I know it sounds simple, but never discount a good old-fashioned Google search. If you put in virtual jobs, for nurses or virtual job, that sort of thing, you'd be shocked at what will pop up, and you may find a really great resource. I would also, anytime, I also like to find niche job boards. So if you find a job board that specializes in your field, always go to that if you know of those, or you run a search and find those job boards, and then look to see if they have a remote or a virtual section to their site, or they have jobs listed as remote or work from home, because you'd be surprised. There are a lot of people, especially recruiters, that are looking for people with certain skills that can do this type of work, and they will list it that way on those job boards. But let me see if I can get back to you, Bill, with a more specific resource before our time's done today.
Yeah, okay. And if you do it afterward, we can post it on our website for people as well. So thanks for that, Perfect. Amanda. Thanks for the call, Del. Jean, who is next in the questioner queue?
We actually have a question from Facebook, and this one's coming from Lisa, and she's asking, is it legal for an employer to phase in employees according to age, like younger to older?
Rebecca Dixon, I wonder if you could field that question for us.
So in terms of phasing, and I presume she means returning to work, so calling folks back into work. Employers are, if an employer has 20 or more employees and you're 40 or above, you are protected under the Age Discrimination Employment Act. And then there's also many states and cities that cover smaller employers, so you'd want to check on that. But it means that an employer can't treat you differently based on your age, including hiring, firing, promotion, layoff, and compensation. And so if that's the case, that would mean that they are violating that. And one piece of action to take is to check in with the Equal Opportunity Employment, so the EEOC, or your state or city Fair Employment Office to file a complaint. And, it's also possible that they could just have a conversation with their employer if they're particularly wanting to come back to work sooner as another avenue. But it does seem to, on its face, violate the law.
Okay. All right, Rebecca, thank you for that. Jean, who's our next questioner?
Our next question is coming from Debbie from North Carolina.
Hey, Debbie, go ahead with your question. Hey, Debbie, you there? Go ahead with the question. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Very good. How are you doing? Go ahead with your question.
Good. So my question is for Mr. Baker, and I'm curious about what his take is on doing a reverse mortgage in these times. Thank you.
You're wondering how wise it is to do a reverse mortgage at this time?
Right, as opposed to taking out money from, or starting the Social Security, or getting debt with a credit card, using the equity of the home.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Debbie. Lee, do you have some thoughts on that for Debbie?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question, Debbie. So this time, or quite frankly, any other time, you want to be very careful when looking at a reverse mortgage for a number of reasons. A reverse mortgage can be a good tool. It can be a means to tap some equity in your home. So if you have a situation where you, a spouse, your children are all on the same page and realize that, there is the potential that you could effectively disinherit the children, those kinds of things, then yes, take a look at a reverse mortgage. There are a number of options where you can get a reverse mortgage set up essentially as a line of credit, taking out a loan. There are times, candidly, when a reverse mortgage, even outside of a situation like this, can be a very good solution to a problem. And candidly speaking, it was a solution for my mother some years ago. My father passed away. After his passing, the pension benefit that he was getting was eliminated. He'd chosen the life-only option. So the pension and some of the Social Security benefit was gone away. My mother's Social Security benefit went up to meet what my father's benefit was, but there was a drastic drop in income. And so doing a reverse mortgage actually became a very good solution for my mother, but it's specific to her situation. So exploring a reverse mortgage, there's a ton of resources on the AARP website about reverse mortgages, but absolutely that's something you could take a look at and consider.
Okay. Thank you, Lee. Gene, who's our next questioner?
Our caller is Anna from New Jersey.
Hi, Anna. Go ahead with your question. Go ahead with your question. Hi, Anna. You with us?
Yes. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure. Delighted to. Go ahead with your question.
My question is for remote work. I was with a former employer, which I'm no longer, of course, with the employer. Where should I put that I have remote experience? Should it be in the job description, or should it be like a separate section where it says technology? And my question is for Amanda. Thank you. Amanda, thank you.
Okay. Amanda, did you get that?
Yes, I did. It's a great question, Anna. So there are a few different places. We want to make it obvious that you're a really good match for remote work, especially if you've been remote in the past. So a few different places that you can kind of drop that information in. In the work history section, you can actually put it next to your job title. You could put in parentheses work or virtual position. When it comes down to listing the location, whether you worked remotely part of the time or full time, you could actually list the location as virtual or remote. Or if it was a split between, you might mention, say, Mount Olive, New Jersey, and, remote, something along those lines. Also, whenever you're detailing out a job, what I like to do is have a short blurb that describes the roles and responsibilities. And then your bullet points are really the bragging points. What's the information you want to draw the reader's eye to? And that's normally talking about the accomplishments, the output of your work, what demonstrates you were good at what you do. In those sections, if there's an opportunity to mention that, you beat your sales quota by 50% while traveling 90% of the time, or, brought this project under budget and delivered it on time with a 5-person remote team, something along those lines. You can kind of name drop that information in the technology section, which more often than not is going to fall to the end of your resume. If there are any project management tools you've been using, any communication, collaboration, video conferencing software that you've been using or you feel comfortable using because you've tried it before, I would list that in the technology section. And then in your cover letter, you might drop in a line. This isn't going to be the headline of your cover letter, but you might drop a line in there that shows that you are very, so something to the point of, I've worked remotely X amount of time for X amount of years, or, I have extensive experience working remotely. I have a dedicated workspace, reliable, fast internet connection, and all the tools I need to be productive from home. I'm looking forward to working remotely for your company as well. So just something in there that brings it home. But anytime you can demonstrate that you've been there, done that. I would also add for those out there, for anybody, if you didn't work remotely per se, but you traveled extensively for work, that in my mind and in most employers is the same thing. So be sure to also, highlight those details. Don't assume the reader will read between the lines and understand that. And then I just wanted to follow up really quickly on the last question from Lee. The best way to get to the site that's going to help you figure out if I have these skills, what jobs can I do? It's actually called the Skills Matcher. And it's if you Google Career One Stop, and one is spelled out, so CAREERONESTOP, all one word, Skills Matcher, 2 other words. It will pull it right up to the top. I can't believe I didn't think of it at the time, but it's a site that's actually sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor, and it's a really great place to start.
The Skills Matcher. Okay, that's a good tip. Thank you for that, Amanda.
You're welcome.
Okay, Jean, who is our next caller?
Our next caller is Dolores from Missouri.
Hey, Dolores, go ahead with your question.
Hello?
Hey there, Dolores. Can you hear us? Go ahead with your question. Yes, hi.
My question is, I was working for an employer, and I had gotten sick and was off due to health issues. And right before the COVID started, I had contacted my employer to say I could come back to work. And they said, well, due to COVID and the lack of, work, the workload, that they were going to have and let me stay home, and they would notify me when I could come back, whenever things would open up and they would need the work. And then I found out through another employee who had been let go that my job was up for bid on Indeed. And when I called the office manager to ask about this, she said, well, they could not protect me with my health problems, in this time of COVID. And the only thing that I can see that would need to be done is to wear a mask while I'm at work, and maybe like a plexiglass shield between me and my coworker who work in the same cubicle, like at the grocery store or whatever. And I don't understand what I can do about this, or is there anything, or...
So just so I can get this straight, you're still facing health issues, but you're anxious to get back to work with precautions.
Yeah. Right. I have asthma, and, it is a doctor's office, but I work in a cubicle. I do their work comp stuff, so a lot of my stuff is on phone. I do see people stop in, but other than a, plexiglass shield like that's at the grocery store or whatever, I don't understand why they couldn't supply that and let me come back. At this time, it's under control. I'm fine.
Right,
I've had a COVID test, and it was negative.
Got it. And you said that eliminated your job, that they had posted it on Indeed, I think. Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, Rebecca Dixon, I wonder if you could provide any advice for Dolores.
Absolutely. So first off, I think if you have actually been furloughed, so you reported that you were able to return to work and they said they didn't have work for you, that sounds like a furlough to me. And the first step you would want to take is to apply for unemployment insurance benefits if you are able to work and they have told you they don't have work for you. So that would be something I would pursue first off. And then secondly, we don't have a lot of information from our callers, so it's unclear, but there are some avenues. So if she was on approved family medical leave, so FMLA is what it's commonly known as, the Family Medical Leave Act, which provides 12 weeks of unpaid leave a year that's job protected. And that leave varies depending on your tenure at the job. So we don't have that information. But so there's potentially her job would be protected in some way by FMLA. And she'd want to probably best to follow up with an employment law attorney just to be sure in her area, just to be sure if there are any rights to recall that she might have based on FMLA.
it sounds like they never gave her any notice that her job would be posted, and maybe there were some concerns on the part of the doctor's office that they would have to take extra precautions because of her asthma. Are they allowed to do that? I mean, so many people are being furloughed during the coronavirus pandemic.
I think that they may say that it's a business necessity. So that was why I was referring her to an attorney, just so that person can get into the nitty-gritty and details of her actual unique situation. But generally you're not in a situation where they can do that, right? We've never had COVID to deal with. But as I was saying, like, it's unclear to us from the caller whether she is actually still has a job, because it sounds like she heard from someone that they had posted her position, but they haven't told her that she's fired. But they have told her that they don't have hours for her. And so a furlough is when you don't have work. And so even if you're not completely laid off, I think the most important thing to do to get income coming in is to go ahead and file for unemployment insurance. And that might actually trigger getting some more information from her employer.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, Rebecca. Jean, who is our next caller?
We have another one coming in from Facebook, and this one is coming in from Kimberly, and she's asking, I'm currently on furlough due to the pandemic. I'm returning on a part-time status under 25 hours per week. I'm receiving unemployment now, including the stimulus, $600 stimulus. I'll be returning to work about 2 days a week. I know that I can still receive unemployment, but will I continue to receive the stimulus until at least July 31st? I think this one she's asking for Mr. Baker.
All right, Lee, are you able to field that one?
Yeah, so I think I got it. Now, part of it is state-specific, so I couldn't go there specific to your state. But as it sounds like she understands, there's two components to the unemployment benefits. It's the traditional unemployment benefits that we always get or are always available from the state. And on average, that's about $378 a week. But, of course, that's just an average. So it's going to vary from one state to the next. The other component is the $600. That is the federal component that comes out of the CARE Act. And, of course, at this point in time, it's scheduled to end at the end of next month on July 31st. So the short answer to the question is yes, you can continue and get a partial unemployment check if you're going back on a full-time basis. Now, where it gets a little tricky is how that's calculated. Now, I think it indicated, if I heard Jean correctly, she's looking at 2 days per week. So that's going to be pretty close. Normally, I think we're looking at a 60% reduction in income in order to be able to get the partial benefit. So I think she's going to be close there. My advice in this particular instance is to reach out to the state and figure out exactly what it is from a state-specific level. But again, the short answer is yes, partial unemployment benefits are available. You should still be able to get the federal component through the end of July, but really going to have to hone in on things that are state-specific and their particular reduction in income from one state to the next.
Okay, thanks for that, Lee. Jean, let's do one more caller.
All right. Our next caller is Ellen from New York.
Hi, Ellen. Go ahead with your question.
My question would be, back in the third week of May, and it came out in the press, there was talk about the Skills Renewal Act. And since I have been unemployed for about a year, and I do have like 30-plus years experience, so I have the soft skills, the technology, and everything. It's been really hard because of my age. I was wondering, the only thing I don't have is college education. Is there any program that offers accredited degrees that you can get at either at a discounted rate or as a senior citizen free?
Amanda, Augustine, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
So I'm not sure if there are any programs that are necessarily set up to give special discounts based on age or experience, that sort of thing. I do know there are a ton of online courses you can take that are free on sites such as Coursera, so the word course, RA at the end, edx.org, Skillshare, which some of those might be paid, some of those are free. LinkedIn has a LinkedIn Learning section now, but that one is paid. But again, to take specific courses that would put you ahead versus going for a full degree, there are a lot of options out there for that. In truth, I wouldn't dwell on the degree very much. We did a study at TopResume not that long ago, maybe less than a year ago, where we were asking employers, what matters most? Skills, experience, potential, education. And we gave them a few different scenarios. Education was always at the bottom of the list. Somewhere between 2 and 3% of all respondents would actually say it was the most important thing. And I bet a lot of money that's because those people were recruiting for roles in, say, science, doctors, that sort of thing, where it was really necessary. So I don't know if I'd really spend the money and invest in that area unless you're finding that every job absolutely requires it, because we're seeing actually a lot of companies, especially some big name brands, are moving away from requiring a degree as part of the job description. You're seeing a lot of times it will say a degree in X years of experience or this many years of relevant experience. And so I definitely wouldn't dwell on that. And if you do come across that job that seems like the perfect fit and the only thing missing is that required degree, that's when I'd really go to my network and see if I know anybody who currently or previously worked at that company or has a friend who currently or previously worked at that company, and see if they're willing to pass your application along and vouch for your skills. Because if you've got everything else, the degree is not a hang up like it used to be years ago.
Mm. Interesting. Thanks for that, Amanda. And just a reminder to our listeners, if you'd like to ask your question, please press *3. We'll come back to caller questions in just a moment, but let's focus on how to navigate the possibility of unemployment and furloughs during this uncertain time. Rebecca, Dixon, I wanted to ask you a question. Across the country, people have faced challenges getting access to unemployment benefits. What are the causes of this, and what should people do if they're having trouble getting their benefits?
Sure, Bill. The problem boils down to three pieces. So technology, staffing, and funding. In over half the states, the technology that they're working with to process benefit payments was put together in the 60s or 70s. So working with a legacy mainframe really slows everything down in terms of processing. We also have a situation where the state agencies that do UI payments are funded based on the prior year's unemployment rate. And so when COVID hit, they were at basically bare bones staffing levels because our unemployment rate was so low. And so they needed to staff up quickly, and some of the federal stimulus did provide extra funding for them to do that. But their funding on a year-to-year basis doesn't really take into account being able to upgrade their technology. And so this was just the perfect storm. The millions of unemployment claims that are coming in each week is just unprecedented. And so even if their technology was perfect, we would expect there to be some delay and disruption just because of the sheer size of it. But these issues with technology and staffing and funding are the primary reasons why there are issues. And in terms of what to do, the short answer is keep trying. So if you're not able to get through on the phones, try to apply online. If you have questions and are not able to get those answered, just keep trying. And the claims are going down. We had 1.5 million claims reported today. But that's still a record number. And so I think having patience and just trying and continuing to try is the answer that we have right now.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that, Rebecca. Lee, let's turn to you. And we got into this a little bit earlier. People are receiving unemployment benefits, and they have a temporary increase of $600 each week. Those are set to expire at the end of July, and it's not clear whether Congress will renew that. What suggestions do you have for people to plan and stay afloat financially?
Yeah, so there's a few things I think people should do, and candidly, the very first one is what most of us don't like to do, and that's budget. Budgeting is something we should do all the time. It's incredibly much more important to budget in our current environment. It's one of those things where, in addition to simply having a budget, to be very clear about the budget and how you segment those things. There's some things that we absolutely have to do, keep a roof over our heads and buy food, but take a look at some of the things that you typically buy. Get smarter with the grocery shopping if you can. Another thing for some people, and it's one of the issues that is a bit of a point of contention in Congress right now, and that's the fact that for some people at lower income levels, the additional $600 in unemployment benefit as a result of the federal legislation has put some people in a situation where they're actually earning more money, if you will, through the combined unemployment benefits than they were at work. Well, if you find yourself in that situation, use this opportunity to not inflate your lifestyle. So if, for example, the federal unemployment benefit of $600, and let's just use that average of $378, so that's about $1,000 a week. If your income prior to COVID-19 or prior to being laid off was lower than that, don't inflate your income. Use that additional money to either add to emergency reserves, or if you didn't have emergency reserves beforehand, let's go ahead and use this opportunity to create some emergency reserves. Another thing that I would suggest that people do is you start to look at the potential that this benefit expires. If you're in a situation and you don't think that your job is going to come back, start looking now for other opportunities. It might not be what you were doing before, but as you go through this job search, there are some segments of our economy that have been growing and are hiring. Again, maybe it's Target, Lowe's, Kroger, all of those sorts of companies have actually been doing well, if you will, during this, and provides an opportunity for employment as you look at the potential or likelihood that the $600 is going to expire here in the next 5 or 6 weeks. And the other thing I'd like to remind folk of is not to forget about taxes. Okay, a lot of people think that, hey, there's no tax consideration for unemployment benefits. That's not the case. So remember to keep taxes in mind for later on.
All right. Well, thanks, Lee. And your advice about creating emergency reserves now makes a lot of sense. I mean, as we've seen states, loosen their COVID-related restrictions, we've also seen an uptick in cases in parts of the country. So it's just a reminder how uncertain the future is for all of us.
Absolutely.
Amanda, I want to come back to you and ask, if somebody is hopeful about returning to the job, what can they be doing now to maintain that line of communication with their employer? And what planning should they be doing to protect their income and interests? Are there specific steps they should be taking to be more competitive for the job market in the future?
That's a great question. My motto is really hope for the best, but plan for the worst. So if you haven't been in regular communication with your employer, now's the time to start that up. Ideally, you'd like to get on the phone with them so you can gauge the tone of their voice and get a better read on what's going on. But feel free to whatever, communication channel you were using before, whether it was texting or email, now's the time to definitely check in. If you feel comfortable going back to work, if you would be one of those people who's raising their hand and says, when the doors open, I want in. Make sure they're aware of that. Don't assume they know that. Because they'll make assumptions. They will make assumptions that you're concerned about your health or the risks. And if you are willing to take those risks, you want to let them know. Now, while that's all good and said, and you want to figure out when's the next time should I check in with you, it's kind of like the same thing as when you're checking in and following up after an interview. Get a sense of what they're thinking and what their plan is so you know when to follow up again. But while all this is going on, I would 100% be gearing up as though you were going into full job search mode, whether you're going to have to or not. It's always better to explore your options and get ahead than when you must do it right away. And so I would start by looking at some of the job boards and exploring your options to get a better sense of what's available, what companies are hiring, where is the need, and where would your skills fall into place with that. Once you have a better sense of what those potential opportunities look like, whether it's a stopgap, a short-term or temporary solution, or a more permanent role that you would make a more permanent change to, whichever goal it is, now's the time to start updating your resume, looking at your experience, and looking at it from the frame of mind of this new goal. It's all about reframing your old experience. This is the time to gather any information and data that you'll need to boost your resume. When you still have access to your company's records, when you can still go through your email, all those things, that's when you can pull the meaty information that's going to make your resume really stand out, because then you can put some numbers behind the work you've been doing. So I'd update the resume, definitely get a free resume review so you make sure you're going in the right direction. And then apply those same best practices to your LinkedIn profile. And if you decide that you may be making a change or something like that, this is also the time to kind of do that skill gap analysis and determine, is there something I really should be learning? Is there a certificate I would really need to get based on what I'm seeing in those job descriptions? And again, the job goal is going to dictate which of those actions. The very last thing that I would recommend doing is that if you haven't necessarily been keeping up with your professional network, now's the time to do so. If you've been neglecting them, now's the time to kind of check in and see what's going on and just reacquaint yourself so that you're better poised, because we do know that on average, about 50% of open positions are never published online. The only way you will ever find out about those positions is if you are talking to people and finding out what their companies are looking for. That's not necessarily ending up on a job board or on the company site. And so now's the time to really start engaging, because you can network even if you're at home. All you need is a telephone.
Or an internet connection, right? Yeah. So thank you for
Exactly.
that, Amanda. I appreciate it. Rebecca, let's turn to you and talk about age discrimination. We know age discrimination is an ever-present issue in the workplace, and more than 6 in 10 older workers report seeing or experiencing it on the job. And research shows that older workers have a harder time getting rehired. During this challenging time, how can people know if they're being discriminated against on the basis of their age, and what should they do if they think they have been?
Sure, Bill. So if your employer has 20 or more employees and you are age 40 or above, then you're protected by federal law, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. And it's important to note that some cities and states actually protect workers at places that have less than 20 employees. So it's important to check your city and local as well. But basically, the act means that employers can't treat you differently based on your age, and that includes, like you listed, hiring, firing, promotion, job assignments, training, benefits, and you can't be harassed on the job because of your age either. And so it's really hard, though. It can be difficult to determine if an employer's actions were actually motivated by age discrimination or by some other reason around thinking about who can perform the particular job the best. So some terms to watch out for, if you hear them saying words like overqualified, if you hear them referring to how much it may cost to hire you, you should pay attention to the functions of the job and what it says thereafter in the job posting. If you're asked about your age, you should not lie about your age. but you should ask them why they need to know that information and keep notes of those questions or any other comments like the ones I just talked about. And then if you think you have been laid off or not called back or not hired because of your age, you can go to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, or your state or city Fair Employment Office and file a complaint.
Okay, thank you for that advice. I'd like to take a moment to provide a quick AARP Fraud Watch Network coronavirus alert. Scammers continue to use the headlines as opportunities to steal money or sensitive personal information from people. And we're getting text messages supposedly from contact tracers warning that you've been exposed to somebody with COVID-19. The message includes a link that, if clicked, will download malicious software and give the scammers access to your personal and financial information. Please know that messages from actual contact tracers working for public health agencies will not include a link or ask you for money or personal data. Stay safe by not clicking on links from unexpected text messages. You can visit AARP.org/FraudWatchNetwork to learn more about these and other scams, or call the Fraud Watch Network helpline at 877-908-3360. Now it's time to address more of your questions with Amanda Augustine, Rebecca, and Lee Baker. Press star 3 at any time on your telephone keypad to be connected with an AARP staff member. Jean, who is our next caller?
Our next caller is Clifford from Michigan.
Hi, Clifford. Go ahead with your question. Hi, Clifford. Are you with us? Clifford, if you're with us, go ahead and ask your question.
Right, I think we lost Clifford. I'm going to go to the next caller.
Okay.
Our next caller is Glenford from D.C.
Hey, welcome to the show. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, my question is, I am currently retired, and I have an IRA investment. And what I need to know is, given the current coronavirus pandemic, would I be losing money in my investment? And if I'm losing money, what is my solution?
You're asking if your IRA is losing money because of the coronavirus?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Lee, do you want to weigh in on that? Do you have any words of advice for Glenford or others in retirement?
Sure. Yeah. So Glenford and any of our other listeners out there that are participating, the one thing that you want to do is check your account statements regularly. So every month you should get a statement from the provider. Maybe it's your 401k account, but specifically he's talking about his IRA account. And that way you'll know for certain, one, if you've lost money and the magnitude of that loss. Now, is it likely that most of our accounts are lower now than they were 5-6 months ago? Yeah, it's likely that it's lower as a result of coronavirus. But one of the things that we do when we're working with clients is we always set up a long-term game plan, or what we might refer to as an investment policy statement. The reason you want to do this is because one of the things that we know as it relates to investments is that the markets are going to go up and down. The problem is we don't know when they're going to go up, we don't know exactly when they're going to go down, and we don't know how long it's going to go in either direction. And so it's very important to make sure that your time horizon, or that period of time before you're going to need those the money from those investments, is appropriate to the level of risk that you're going to take. Another thing that we do with our clients, particularly those who are in retirement, is make sure that there is enough liquidity or that there's enough cash on hand, either outside of the IRA or within the IRA, so that as markets go up or down, you don't find yourself in a situation where you have to sell some of your investments, your stocks or your mutual funds inside of the IRA after they've gone down. So imagine, if you will, you started this year, 2020, and you didn't have ample cash in order to cover your expenses for a few months. Well, what you likely experienced in March, April is having to sell some of your assets after the market had gone down and absolutely locked in a loss. But on the other hand, imagine if you did have the cash inside of your IRA or outside to cover your expenses for 6 months or 12 months. As bad as things have been from an investment perspective, right now markets are only down 5-6% for the year. They went down really, really fast. And at March 23rd, they started heading back up almost just as fast. So again, take a look at your statements, compare. That's the best way to determine whether or not you actually had a loss, not necessarily what you've heard on the news, but also take this time to assess whether or not your risk tolerance or your ability to withstand the ups and downs in the market is actually matched to the way that you manage your portfolio.
It's a good distinction. I hadn't really thought of it before. Watching the news every day and the ups and downs of the market can be alarming, but so much depends on how your own investments are structured. So you may be following the market, but there's a chance that you may not be at all. And so it's good advice. Check your statements and follow up with your provider to see what's been happening. Okay, Gene, who's our next caller?
Our next caller is Helen from Wisconsin.
Hi, Helen. Go ahead with your question.
From my clinical social work job 2 years ago at age 76 because of some health issues. I have recovered now, and I'm wondering what is the best way to present myself again for reemployment.
And you were a career clinical social worker, is that right?
Yes, that's what I did for 45 years.
Wow. Okay. But I'd like to get back into the workforce as in another profession or something similar, but not a clinical social worker. Is that right?
I wouldn't mind being a clinical social worker again. My only concern about that is that I have to use a walker, and I wondered if that would be a barrier to reemployment, and if so, how I could deal with that.
Okay. Well, you, Helen. Let me go first to Amanda. What should Helen be doing to kind of reintroduce herself back into the workforce? And I wonder if after that, Rebecca, you could weigh in whether having a walker should or is an obstacle for employment.
Sure. Helen, it sounds like you have such extensive work and experience in this area, and that's a job that takes a lot of heart. My assumption would be that you've probably met a lot of people through that work, a lot of coworkers who may or may not have moved on. I would 100% first tap my network. Reach out to people that you've worked with in the past who were in the similar line of work or you previously worked at the same place and see what are they doing now, where are they working, do they know of any opportunities. I wonder if anything is being done right now in particular that's through video conferencing in lieu of going into people's homes or into an office for the group therapy and that sort of stuff. So I'd be curious to see if they're aware of anything that's going on, particularly has anything been modified or adjusted given what's going on with COVID to, limit the face-to-face communication, because that might actually be a great way for you to start getting back into that line of work. In addition, those people are your advocates. Those who have worked with you and know how good you are at what you do are the ones who are going to advocate for you, regardless of having a break since you were previously working. When it comes to the resume, this is when it gets a little tricky, of course, because your most recent role ended and there's a gap there. So the best way to try and fill that gap on the resume is identifying, is there an online course you could be doing? Could you be volunteering your skills in what's known as a skills-based volunteer opportunity, abbreviated as SBV? There are a number of sites out there. One is called Catch a Fire, all one word, Catch a Fire. But if you search for skills-based volunteer opportunities, you can say, this is the expertise I have. I'm willing to help a charity, a nonprofit. And this is a way for you to leverage your skills and get back into the groove while you're searching for that paid role. What I like is that as soon as you start doing that volunteer work, you can put that at the top of your resume as recent experience. And I think that's really important for people to keep in mind, that you can put experience on your resume that you were not paid for. As long as it's relevant to what you're doing and shows that you were building, growing, or keeping your skills sharp, put it on there. It does not matter if you were getting paid for it. But this will help at least eliminate that immediate perception of, oh, well, Helen's been out of work for a while. We don't want them to see that. We want them to see that you've been leveraging your skill set in a way that's made you very relevant to what you want to do next.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Amanda. Rebecca Dixon, I wonder if you could weigh in. Helen mentioned right at the end there that she has a walker and was worried that might preclude her from some job opportunities. What can you say to her about that?
Sure, Bill. So what we would want to make sure is that she's not discriminated against based on disability. So there's also a federal law that covers that. And like what we talked about with age discrimination, it affects certain employers of certain sizes, so it applies to certain size employers. So she'd want to make sure that that her employer is covered, or potential employer is covered. And also the state and city rules are sometimes smaller employers. But basically, the law says you can't treat an applicant or employee less favorably because they have a history of disability, or because they are believed to have a physical or mental impairment that will last longer than 6 months, or if it's minor. Also, the law requires the employer to provide a reasonable accommodation. So for Helen with her walker, unless her having a walker causes the employer undue difficulty or expense, so what they call undue hardship as a term of art, they would have to provide her with an accommodation. So there shouldn't be she shouldn't be concerned about that, but she should also just keep an eye out for any kind of words or phrases that she might hear during her interview process that would make it seem that they don't want to provide an accommodation, or that they're just kind of making a snap judgment about what she can do without talking to her about an accommodation.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Rebecca. Jean, who is our next caller?
Our next caller is Frank from Pennsylvania.
Hey, Frank, welcome to the show. Go ahead with your question.
I was wondering, being that they canceled the income tax that y'all was doing for the seniors, would not y'all be able to pick that back up anytime soon, or whether or not they're going to extend it again, or can you help me out on that?
Sure. You're talking about the tax aid program that AARP offered. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. So what Frank was referring to was the free tax preparation service that the AARP Foundation offers annually. And we had to close all of our, in-person locations because of the coronavirus pandemic. We're providing free online tax preparation assistance through TaxAid now through July 15th. So you can get assistance through the program online. So if you Google TaxAid AARP, you can find the program and get assistance online. Now we've opened up some in-person locations around the country, but that is all dependent on the local governments there and how much the restrictions have been lifted. And so you need to check with your local area. But there is a way of searching on the TaxAid site to see if website to see if there is an in-person site in your area. Short of that, I would suggest the online tax preparation assistance. Very good. Do we have another question, Jean?
Yes, we have Mary from Illinois.
Hi, Mary. Go ahead with your question.
Hi. Actually, I've got a couple. You mentioned taking out a loan on your 401k. What happens to that loan if you get furloughed or you lose your job? When you leave an employer, what happens to that loan?
Okay. And the second question?
The second question was, you were talking about remote jobs, and I've heard there are fake remote jobs, and I'm wondering if there's a way to how can we tell if there are fake jobs, if anyone knows any trick? And the third question was, we're always talking about waiting on SSI, but every year you wait, you lose a year of benefits. I'm wondering if there are circumstances where it is better not to wait.
Okay, well, Leah, you jumped in there. Can you handle that first question about taking a loan on your 401k and also the final question on waiting to claim Social Security?
Yeah. So the first question, if you take out a 401k loan and then you leave your job, and this is a danger, candidly, when you take out a 401k loan, is the balance of that loan becomes due. And all of that, or the unpaid balance of that loan, is going to be considered taxable to you. So you want to be careful with that. The CARES Act has opened up or made some options more friendly to us, or borrower friendly or employee friendly, but there are still restrictions in place. CARES Act did away temporarily with the 10% penalty based on your age. But again, you can expect a pretty big tax bill eventually in the event that you lose your job from 401k and are unable to repay it. The last question she asked about Social Security. Yeah, the conventional wisdom on delaying Social Security is backed by tons of data. If you can wait, then you should wait. Every year that you wait, it's increased benefit. It's 8%. It is very substantial, and candidly, it's the best deal in town if you can wait. But to your question as to whether or not there are some situations where you shouldn't wait, yeah, sometimes there are. In some instances, you exhaust all your other resources and you simply cannot wait, and you don't have any other source of income. So if I'm faced with the option of looking at somebody, sitting next to me around the table, and they say, "Hey, Lee, I've really exhausted all my resources," and we sat down and we've gone through it and considered all the other options, and then they're faced with, okay, I may lose my house if I don't have this income, then yeah, you go ahead and take the Social Security. I would rather you have a roof over your head and have that Social Security benefit now. Sometimes health, life expectancy can make a difference in that equation. Every now and then there's some situations where, the medical advice suggests that your life expectancy is likely to be significantly shorter. It may make sense to go ahead and take that Social Security benefit early in a situation like that.
Okay, Lee, thank you for that. And Mary had also asked about how you can spot fake remote job opportunities. Our Fraud Watch network had actually just recently posted an article on this very topic, and I'll read you some of the warning signs. A job claims that no skills or experience are required. It offers high pay for little or no work. A company promises that a business opportunity is surefire and will pay off quickly and easily, and you're required to pay upfront for training, certifications, directories, or materials. You can see that full story at AARP.org, Fraud Watch Network. So check that out. Amanda, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on that at all, if you had any particular insights.
Sure. I mean, I echo everything that you said, Bill. You know, if the opportunity is too good to be true, it probably is. If the advertising is a hard sell or over the top, or if they're trying to feed on your emotions, you know, saying how much you deserve this opportunity, and they show pictures of mansions and things of that nature, that's always a big, you know, red flag. And if they're interested in any overly personal details, so Social Security number, driver's license, credit card, bank information, they should never, ever, ever be asking you that type of information. Also, if they're name dropping without proof, they keep talking about, you know, being mentioned in well-known publications or being partnered with big name brands, but they can't provide any links to back up their claims. It may not be legitimate, so keep that in mind. And if you do end up actually speaking to someone and you're now starting to kind of question whether it's a legitimate opportunity, do your due diligence. Ask where they're located. Where is the company office or official headquarters? How many employees work remotely? How many are out of the headquarters? You know, you can always, you want to push it, you know, ask them to describe the company's business model. That's also one, so you can get a sense of if this is a multi-level marketing approach or there's a pyramid scheme, things of that nature. Just even how they react to your questions, your probing can give you some insight into whether this doesn't feel right, I should walk away.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you start asking any or all of those questions, if that'll be your answer. Let's go ahead to our next question. Go ahead, Jean.
Our next question is another Facebook question from Claire, and she's asking, what if after being furloughed, you're now having health issues and work in a high-risk health field and aren't feeling safe about returning to work? My employer is getting impatient with me, waiting for me to return.
Dixon, do you want to take a crack at that one?
Yes. So to make sure I understand, it's the person was furloughed, and now they're being asked to return, it sounds like, and not feeling safe. So if you don't feel safe going back, the best thing to do is to go on the first day and see if your employer has done what is necessary to make your workplace safe and healthy. You would actually need to gather some facts to support refusing to go back to work if it comes to that. So some questions like, how has the company followed the CDC and OSHA or any state and local guidance on reopening? Do they provide PPE, hand sanitizer? Are they requiring distancing? Those common things. And if you see that these aren't in place or that you can't social distance, then you can complain. And always better to have more than one person, so to have a coworker or more come with you or be with you around the complaint. And you would then want to ask permission to not return to work until there's adequate safety measures in place. You could also ask for a staggered schedule that would allow there to be fewer people at one time. And then if you're unable to come to work because of public transit, which is a big issue for some folks because it's crowded, you can point to any kind of local guidance that is in effect in your area around that transportation. And so you'd really want to make sure you're looking at your local, state, and federal agency websites. But generally, from an unemployment insurance standpoint, if that person is currently collecting unemployment because they're furloughed, it's going to depend on the state in terms of whether she would lose her unemployment insurance by not returning. But you would want to go back in and do that check around workplace health and safety if you are going to then refuse the job, because that puts you in the best position, depending on your state law, to actually be able to continue to receive unemployment benefits.
Okay, thank you for that advice. Jean,
Our next caller is Arlene from Pennsylvania.
Hey, Arlene, go ahead with your question.
Can I collect unemployment when I have Social Security benefits?
Okay, very straightforward question. Lee, can you answer that one for her?
So if you are working or were working, to the best of my knowledge, there is not a reason that you would not be able to collect unemployment benefits from the work that you had been doing.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank our whole panel, Amanda, Rebecca, and Lee. Do you have any closing thoughts or recommendations for that AARP members should understand most from the conversation today? Why don't we start with you, Amanda?
Yeah, you know what? I would say for everybody, follow the mantra of hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. So whether your employment situation is uncertain or you're currently unemployed, now's the time to take action and set yourself up. And it all starts with the job goals. So explore your opportunities, identify if you're going for a short-term or a long-term strategy, but then resume, LinkedIn, even your networking strategy, it's all going to be based on whatever goal you're currently pursuing. And don't be afraid to ask for help. That's what services like AARP's Resume Advisor, that's what we're all here for, is to help you in any way we can.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Amanda. Rebecca Dixon, any closing thoughts or recommendations?
Yes, I would recommend that if there is any question about whether you qualify for unemployment insurance, you should apply for it. If you're furloughed, you can qualify for UI. If your hours are cut, you may qualify for partial unemployment. The biggest reasons that people don't get the unemployment insurance benefits that they're entitled to is not applying. So really want to encourage folks to apply. And even if they're having trouble getting through on the phone or the computers, to keep trying, because that's what the program was designed for this moment right now. And I would just also say that I wish everyone well and that they don't have these issues around any kind of discrimination as they search for jobs and return to work.
All right. Thank you for that. Lee Baker, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say, take this moment that we're in and sit down and do an assessment of where you are, where you want it to be. What were your goals before COVID-19? Develop a plan to see if you can still achieve those goals after COVID-19. And then after you've taken the time to sit down and draw out a vision of what you want to do, you've got to act. Just as Rebecca mentioned, people don't get the benefit because they don't apply. It's great to have a goal. It's even better to have a plan, but none of it's worth it if you don't take the time to act and implement.
Baker, thank you. Well said. And thanks to each of you for answering our questions. This has been a really informative discussion. And thank you, our AARP members, volunteers, and listeners for participating in this discussion. AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan member organization, has been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years. We're providing information and resources for older adults to protect themselves from the virus, others while taking care of themselves. All the resources referenced, including reporting of today's Q&A, at aarp.org/coronavirus starting June 19th. Again, that web address is aarp.org/coronavirus. Go there if your question was not addressed, and you will find the latest updates as well as information created specifically for older adults and family caregivers. We hope you learned something that can help you and your loved ones stay healthy. Please be sure to tune in tonight, Thursday, June 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, when we will focus on how to strengthen relationships. We will feature actress Marlo Thomas and her husband, daytime talk trailblazer Phil Donahue. They will discuss how their new book, which features advice from 40 celebrities for celebrity couples on how to make relationships last. We'll then be back with another event on Thursday, July 9th. Thank you and have a good day. This concludes our call.